Welcome back, folks, to Full Spectrum Frontiers. I'm your host, Bennett Tanton, here to break down the complex world of conflict, national security, and what it all means for you and me. You know, the average, hardworking Americans trying to make sense of it all. And trust me, there's plenty to make sense of these days. Today, we're tackling a heavy hitter, the Israeli conflict with Hamas and Hezbollah, and how it affects U.S. national security. Now, before your eyes glaze over with thoughts of foreign affairs being over their problems, let me promise you, this is not just some geopolitical chess game played thousands of miles away. This conflict has real-life, real-time impacts on everything from the safety of our troops abroad to the price of gas at the pump, and yes, even the security of our own neighborhoods. I know, not what you signed up for when you bought that sweet pickup truck, right? But here we are. But don't worry, I'm not here to bury you in doom and gloom. Sure, there are some serious challenges, but like always, we're going to zoom out, see the big picture, and hopefully leave you with some hope for where we're headed. You know me, I don't sugarcoat anything, but I also believe we can learn from these situations and come out stronger on the other side. If we don't blow ourselves up first. Kidding. Sort of. So, before we dive into the nitty-gritty, let me remind you, if you love what you're hearing, or even just mildly enjoy it, hit that like button, share this episode with your friends, and leave a review. I mean, if I'm going to talk to myself for an hour, I might as well know you're out there listening, right? All right, let's get started. All right, folks, let's dive in with a bit of background, because before we can talk about how this conflict affects us, we need to understand what we're talking about. I know foreign policy can sometimes feel like trying to decipher ancient hieroglyphics, but trust me, this is important. And I'll do my best to make it feel more like story time than a college lecture. So, here's the deal. Israel, Hamas, and Hezbollah. 3 names that keep popping up in the headlines, but if you're not exactly clear on who's who or what's what, you're definitely not alone. I mean, not everybody wakes up with their coffee and a map of the Middle East, right? Let's start with Israel. Israel's a small country, but it's a big player in the global game, especially when it comes to U.S. foreign policy. Think of Israel as America's close buddy in a pretty rough neighborhood. We're talking about a region where tensions run high, tempers flare, and trust. Trust is a rare commodity. Now, from Israel's perspective, Hamas and Hezbollah are like the local bullies, except these bullies come with rockets and aren't afraid to use them. Hamas, for those of you unfamiliar, controls the Gaza Strip. It's a Palestinian Islamist political organization and militant group. In simpler terms, they don't get along with Israel. And by don't get along, I mean they've been launching rockets at Israeli cities for years, while Israel retaliates with military strikes of its own. It's been a cycle of violence that just keeps spinning, and the civilian toll on both sides is devastating. But that's not the end of it. Enter Hezbollah. This group is a bit different. They're based in Lebanon, and unlike Hamas, they're backed heavily by Iran. I'm talking money, weapons, and training. If Hamas is a local bully, Hezbollah is more like a regional mob boss. with the resources to cause even bigger problems. They've got a lot of influence in Lebanon, but their main goal, just like Hamas, is to oppose Israel. They're armed to the teeth, and they've been involved in skirmishes with Israel for decades. Now, you might be asking, where does the U.S. come into all this? Well, because of our long-standing alliance with Israel, the U.S. is inevitably involved. Our government provides Israel with military aid, diplomatic support, and, let's not forget, intelligence sharing. This relationship makes us a key player in the conflict, whether we like it or not. And the ripple effects of this conflict can quickly reach U.S. soil, whether through our military presence in the region, global terror networks, or economic ramifications like, you guessed it, oil prices. But why does this keep happening? Why can't we all just get along? Well, it's complicated. The Israeli-Palestinian conflict has roots that go back generations, and every time a new player enters the game, whether it's Hamas, Hezbollah, or even Iran, it gets even messier. Religion, land disputes, historical grievances, it's all baked into the cake, and the icing is conflict. And this isn't just a matter of who threw the first punch. We're talking about layers upon layers of geopolitical tension. To sum it up, Israel is caught in a constant struggle with Hamas and Hezbollah, both of which refuse to recognize its right to exist and want to see it weakened or even wiped off the map. On the flip side, Israel, with U.S. support, sees these groups as existential threats that need to be contained, preferably eliminated. It's a high-stakes game, and when things escalate, like they often do, it's not just Israel that feels the shockwaves, and that's exactly where the U.S. comes in. Now that you've got the basics, we're going to dig into why this ongoing conflict matters so much to American national security. I promise we'll get into more than just politics. Think about everything from our military operations to the economy to what all this means for our safety here at home. It's all connected. Now that we've laid out the basics of the conflict, let's talk about the elephant in the room, Iran. I know, just hearing the name might make some of you brace for bad news, but hang with me here, because understanding Iran's role is key to grasping the full scope of what's going on. You see, Iran doesn't just support Hamas and Hezbollah, it sponsors them like a really dangerous version of a corporate sponsor. And we're not talking about a couple of checks here and there. Iran pumps serious money, weapons, and training into these groups. Why? Because it's all part of a broader strategy to expand their influence across the Middle East. And guess who stands in their way? That's right, Israel, and by extension, the United States. But here's where things start to get even more interesting. And by interesting, I mean tense. Iran has ambitions far beyond just supporting Hezbollah and Hamas. They want to be the dominant power in the region, and their goals often put them in direct opposition to U.S. interests. And when I say direct opposition, I mean they're actively working to undermine our presence in the Middle East and chip away at our influence. If we were playing chess, Iran's strategy is all about putting us in check. So what happens if Iran manages to destabilize Israel or embolden groups like Hamas and Hezbollah to a point where the conflict explodes into a larger regional war? Well, it's not just Israel's problem anymore. It's ours, too. A major escalation could pull other countries into the fray, including Syria, Lebanon, and even Egypt. This is what's known as the domino effect, where one conflict triggers another, and before you know it, the whole region is in flames. Now, why should you care? After all, it's easy to think, well, that's over there. I've got my own problems right here. But here's the thing. What happens over there does affect us here. And I'm not just talking about the obvious stuff, like oil prices or the stock market taking a nosedive. I'm talking about security threats that could land on American soil. Take Hezbollah, for example. These guys aren't just limited to the Middle East. They've got global networks, including cells in Latin America, Africa, and even Europe. And while the US has done a good job keeping them out of our backyard, that doesn't mean we're immune. If tensions between Iran, Hezbollah, and Israel escalate, we could see retaliation in the form of terror attacks targeting US interests overseas, or even attempts to strike here at home. It's a scary thought, but it's one we have to be prepared for. But don't go digging a bunker in your backyard just yet. There's some good news here. The US has been working to contain Iran's influence for years through diplomatic channels, sanctions, and, yes, military presence. While it's a delicate balancing act, we've got some of the sharpest minds on this. And if there's one thing the US knows how to do, it's protect its own. However, that doesn't mean we can get complacent. This is where you come in. Staying informed, understanding the bigger picture, these are the first steps in making sure we hold our leaders accountable for how they handle this situation. Because if we look the other way or assume it's someone else's problem, we could find ourselves facing much bigger challenges down the road. And let's be honest, none of us want to wake up to news of another 9/11 type event because we weren't paying attention to the warning signs. In the end, it comes down to this: Iran's influence in the region, their backing of Hamas and Hezbollah, and their ongoing efforts to challenge the US aren't going away anytime soon. But if we stay vigilant, continue to support our allies, and keep our finger on the pulse of what's happening, we can help steer things away from catastrophe. There's always a solution. We just have to work toward it. All right, so now that we've covered the lay of the land with Israel, Hamas, Hezbollah, and Iran, let's shift gears and focus on our own backyard, or more specifically, our military's backyard in the Middle East. You might be thinking, why are we still over there? Well, my friends, we're over there because being over there keeps things from coming over here. And no, that's not just some government spin. There's a reason we've maintained a strong military presence in the region for decades. Here's the deal. The US has a number of military bases spread across the Middle East, from Qatar to Bahrain, Saudi Arabia, Iraq, and beyond. And these aren't just weekend getaway spots for our troops to grab some sunshine. These bases play a crucial role in maintaining stability in the region. Think of them as insurance policies. By having boots on the ground, we can react quickly to any threat, from a terrorist attack to a full-blown conflict. It's not glamorous, but it's necessary. Let's take it back to our main topic, the Israeli conflict with Hamas and Hezbollah. Anytime things heat up over there, it sends ripples through the entire region. And guess who has to be on high alert when that happens? That's right, our forces. When rockets start flying between Israel and Gaza, or skirmishes break out along the Lebanese border, U.S. military personnel stationed in nearby countries have to be ready for anything. Whether it's providing logistical support to Israel, monitoring Iranian movements, or keeping an eye on proxy forces in Iraq and Syria, our guys and gals are in the thick of it. Now, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. Being stationed in the Middle East is no picnic. I've been there, done that, and let me tell you, it's not the Mediterranean cruise you see in the travel ads. These deployments can be long, grueling, and dangerous. And every time the conflict escalates, it increases the risk to our troops. That's why it's critical that we remain engaged, both militarily and diplomatically, to help prevent full-scale wars from breaking out. Here's where things get even more strategic. Our military presence doesn't just protect our troops and interests. It also acts as a deterrent to other bad actors in the region. Iran, for instance, knows that if they make any major moves against Israel, or even try to block key shipping lanes like the Strait of Hormuz, they'll have to deal with a swift response from the U.S. military. And that's not something they want. In a way, our presence keeps the bullies in check. Think of it like having a big bouncer at a nightclub. You might get a few unruly guests, but nobody's starting a full-on bar brawl with that guy standing by the door. But here's the thing. This all comes at a cost. Maintaining a military presence in the Middle East isn't cheap. The financial burden, combined with the strain on our service members and their families, means we have to carefully weigh the pros and cons of staying involved in these conflicts. But as long as the threats remain, so does the need for our strategic positioning. And let's not forget about the human cost. I've been in those boots, and I've seen firsthand how deployments can take a toll on our soldiers. It's not just about the risk of combat, though that's very real. It's about the months away from family, the mental strain, and the emotional roller coaster of being in a high-stakes environment. When we talk about national security, it's easy to focus on the big picture, the geopolitics, the military strategies. But we can't forget about the people who make it all happen. Our military is full of incredible men and women who put their lives on the line every day to keep the rest of us safe. They deserve our support and our gratitude, no matter how messy these conflicts get. So, what's the bottom line here? The U.S. military is in the Middle East for a reason: to protect our interests, support our allies, and keep threats like Hamas, Hezbollah, and Iran in check. It's a tough job, but it's one that has to be done if we want to maintain stability in the region and, by extension, keep ourselves safe here at home. It's not perfect, and there are always going to be risks, but that's the cost of national security in today's world. And if anyone can handle it, it's the men and women of the U.S. military. Now, in the next section, we're going to dig deeper into how all of this ties back to the homeland. Because yes, even though this might seem far away, it's got direct implications for you, me, and everyone here. All right, folks, let's bring this conversation a little closer to home. We've talked about Israel, Hamas, Hezbollah, and Iran, and how the U.S. military plays a crucial role in keeping all those moving parts from spiraling out of control. But what about us here? Sitting comfortably in our homes, doing our daily grind. How does this faraway conflict actually impact our security? Well, buckle up, because this part might hit closer to home than you think. The truth is, conflicts like the one between Israel and groups like Hamas and Hezbollah have a direct impact on the threat of terrorism and radicalization, not just in the Middle East, but right here in the US. It's a concept that national security experts call blowback. Essentially, what happens there doesn't stay there. This isn't Vegas. This is global warfare, and sometimes the consequences spill over in ways that are impossible to ignore. Let's start with radicalization. You see, groups like Hamas and Hezbollah don't just wage war on battlefields. They also wage war in the minds of disaffected people. The conflict in the Middle East is a powerful propaganda tool for these groups to recruit people, not just in their own regions, but globally. And while it might seem far-fetched, radicalization can happen anywhere, even in communities, right here in the US social media, online forums, and even encrypted chat rooms have become recruitment centers for these organizations. It's like a 24/7 propaganda machine pumping out extremist ideology at a speed we've never seen before. And here's where it gets real. The radicalized individuals, often known as lone wolves, may not have direct ties to groups like Hamas or Hezbollah, but they're inspired by their messaging. They see the conflict in Israel, and they internalize the struggle as part of their own identity. That's why you see acts of terrorism carried out by individuals who claim allegiance to groups they've never actually met. We've seen it before, and it's a threat that continues to evolve. These lone wolf attacks are tough to predict and even harder to stop, and they represent one of the most serious security challenges we face today. Now, I know what you're thinking, but, Bennett, isn't this what counterterrorism agencies are for? And you're absolutely right. The US has some of the most advanced counterterrorism capabilities in the world. Our intelligence agencies, law enforcement, and military work around the clock to prevent these kinds of attacks, often stopping them before they even start. I can't tell you how many times a potential attack has been thwarted thanks to these unsung heroes. But here's the thing, they can't catch everything. The hard truth is that no system is foolproof. We've seen it before. Tragic events where something slips through the cracks and an attack happens on US soil. The Boston Marathon bombing, the Pulse nightclub shooting, and the San Bernardino attack, all of these were carried out by individuals radicalized by extremist ideologies. And guess what? Conflicts like the one between Israel and Hezbollah can serve as the fuel for that fire. When these groups push the narrative of victimhood and resistance, it resonates with some people in ways that can lead to devastating consequences. But don't get me wrong, this doesn't mean we're helpless. In fact, it's the opposite. We've learned a lot since 9/11 about how to combat terrorism. Our intelligence sharing networks are stronger than ever, and law enforcement agencies have become experts at identifying and preventing homegrown threats. But we can't let our guard down. The key to keeping America safe isn't just about reacting to threats. It's about staying one step ahead of them. And that means staying vigilant, staying informed, and not taking our security for granted. Here's where you come in. I'm not saying you need to become a full-time security analyst. That's my job. And trust me, it's a lot of coffee and late nights. But awareness goes a long way. It's easy to think that terrorism is something that happens to other people in other places. But the truth is, we're all part of the same global ecosystem. When conflicts like this flare up, it can have a direct impact on our safety here at home. But, as always, there's hope. The more we understand these threats, the better we can prevent them. And while the conflict between Israel, Hamas, and Hezbollah is complex and ongoing, the U.S. isn't just sitting idly by. We've got the tools, the talent, and the technology to keep ourselves safe. But that safety comes with responsibility. It means supporting policies that address the root causes of terrorism, like poverty and disenfranchisement, and fostering relationships with our allies to share intelligence and resources. So, while the threat of terrorism is real and the potential for radicalization exists, we're not powerless. In fact, we're probably more prepared than we've ever been. And with the right mindset, one that combines vigilance with compassion, I truly believe we can keep our homeland safe while working toward a more peaceful future abroad. All right, next up, we're going to talk about the money. Yep, that's right. Conflict has a way of affecting your wallet, whether you know it or not. Stay tuned, because we're about to dive into the economic ripple effects of this ongoing situation. All right, let's get real for a second. I know some of you are probably wondering, okay, Bennett, I get it. This conflict is serious, but what does it have to do with me and my day-to-day life? Well, buckle up, because now we're diving into how the Israeli conflict with Hamas and Hezbollah affects something that everyone cares about, your wallet. Now, you might not feel the impact of this conflict directly, but trust me, it's lurking behind the scenes in ways you wouldn't expect. And no, this isn't some conspiracy theory. This is straight up economics. And it all starts with one simple word: oil. You see, the Middle East, for better or worse, is the world's oil powerhouse. And even though the US has made strides toward energy independence, thanks fracking, we're still deeply connected to global energy markets. That means when things get dicey in the Middle East, whether it's rockets flying in Israel or tensions boiling over between Iran and Saudi Arabia, it has a direct effect on the price of oil. And when oil prices go up, so does the cost of everything else. Gas for your car, heating for your home, shipping costs for your Amazon packages. It all gets more expensive. Let's break it down. The Middle East is home to some of the world's most important oil-producing nations, and a significant chunk of global oil passes through one very critical bottleneck, the Strait of Hormuz. This narrow waterway between Iran and the Arabian Peninsula is like the jugular vein of the global oil supply. Every day, about 20% of the world's oil passes through this choke point. So, when tensions rise between Israel and groups like Hezbollah, backed by, you guessed it, Iran, the whole world gets nervous about the potential for conflict spilling over and disrupting this vital shipping lane. Now, I'm not saying that every time there's a skirmish in Israel, oil prices skyrocket. But remember, we're talking about a volatile region, and volatility in the Middle East equals uncertainty in the global markets. And guess what? Uncertainty makes investors, and by extension, the rest of us, nervous. If the conflict escalates to the point where it starts affecting oil flows, you better believe we're going to feel it at the pump. And it doesn't stop there. Higher oil prices have a domino effect on the entire economy. Think about it. Transportation costs go up, which means businesses pay more to ship goods. Those costs eventually get passed down to, you guessed it, us, the consumers. So, while you might not be thinking about the conflict in Israel while you're filling up your car, trust me, it's playing a role in that price tag. And when oil prices spike, it can also lead to inflation, which is when prices for everything start creeping up. Groceries, utilities, rent, you name it, it's all connected. So yeah, even though this conflict might feel far away, it's reaching right into your pocket. Now, let's talk about the bigger picture. Beyond just oil, the Middle East is an important part of the global trade network. Disruptions caused by conflict, whether it's closed shipping lanes, destroyed infrastructure, or even just uncertainty, can slow down global trade. And that has ripple effects on economies everywhere, including here in the US. If businesses can't get the materials they need, production slows down. That means fewer goods on the shelves, higher prices, and potentially even job losses. This is the hidden cost of conflict, one that goes beyond the headlines and affects everyday people. But here's where it gets interesting, and dare I say, hopeful. The US has been taking steps to reduce our dependence on Middle Eastern oil. Over the last decade, we've seen a major push toward energy diversification, renewables, natural gas, even nuclear power. And while we're not quite there yet, we're making progress. The more energy independent we become, the less vulnerable we are to these kinds of geopolitical shocks. In fact, that's one of the silver linings of this whole situation. The conflict is forcing us to think about long-term solutions for energy security, and that's a good thing. We've also got strategic oil reserves. In case of emergency, the US government can tap into these reserves to stabilize the market and prevent prices from spiraling out of control. So while there's always a risk of disruption, we're not without tools to mitigate the damage. It's not a perfect solution, but it gives us a buffer against the worst-case scenario. So, what's the takeaway? The conflict in Israel, Hamas, and Hezbollah might feel like it's happening on the other side of the world, but it's tied into a web of economic factors that affect all of us, whether it's at the gas pump, in the grocery store, or in our energy bills. But here's the optimistic side. As we continue to invest in energy independence and diversify our energy sources, we'll be better equipped to weather these kinds of geopolitical storms in the future. It's not going to happen overnight, but the steps we're taking now could lead to a more stable, secure future down the road. All right, folks, we've covered a lot of ground today, from the battlegrounds of the Middle East to the gas stations of Middle America. In the next episode, we'll dive into the solutions, the ways we can, as a nation, navigate these complex issues and come out stronger on the other side. But before we wrap this one up, let's head into the outro. My friends, that brings us to the end of today's episode. We've traveled from the heart of the Middle East to your local gas station and, hopefully, left you with a better understanding of how these conflicts are not just distant events, but critical factors that affect our day-to-day lives right here in the US. From military strategy and national security to energy prices and even the risk of terrorism, this stuff matters. And the more we know about it, the better prepared we are as a nation. Look, I get it. Talking about conflicts and security threats can feel heavy, even overwhelming at times. But here's the good news. We're not just passengers on this ride. We have the power to stay informed, to hold our leaders accountable, and to push for policies that not only protect us, but make the world a little safer, a little more stable. There's always room for hope, even in the midst of conflict. So, if you found today's episode insightful, or even if you just mildly enjoyed it, go ahead and hit that like button. Share it with your friends, your family, your dog. Okay, maybe not your dog, but seriously, spread the word. The more people we can get thinking critically about these issues, the better off we'll all be. And if you haven't already, please leave a review on your favorite podcast platform. It helps the show grow and reach more folks like you who are curious about the world, but maybe don't have time to sift through mountains of foreign policy jargon. That's what I'm here for, to make sense of it all, and maybe even crack a few jokes along the way. Thank you for tuning in to Full Spectrum Frontiers. I'm your host, Bennett Tanton, reminding you that while the world may be complex and sometimes chaotic, there's always a way forward. Until next time, stay informed, stay vigilant, and, most importantly, stay hopeful. We've got a lot more to cover, and together, we're going to navigate this full spectrum of conflict with our heads held high. Take care, and I'll catch you on the next one.
It's just you, me, and the odds. We stuck together, we two peas in a pod. You dealt a bad hand, I'm there seizing the cards. We'll never be separated till we see in the gods. We've been low together, high forever. Long as we go together, we'll die whenever. Be a light, couldn't let the darkness try you ever. Truth in my word, you I lie to never. And when the world gets a little too hard, wipe your eyes, put away your sorrow. When it's war, I'll be leading the charge, and I'll be still fighting for you tomorrow. Yeah, even with a blindfold or in different time zones, could find my way to you with my eyes closed. There's nothing between us. Go to Mars and Venus, stand in front of every one of them rocks, they slimming and be a shield. Yeah.
In the fiercest battle, I'll defend you. From all these arrows in the sword, I will keep you from danger. Let me be your shield.
Yeah, let's go. Let me be your shield, let me be your shield. Let me be your shield, let me be your shield. Let me be your shield, let me be your shield. Let me be your shield, let me be your
You may be facing tribulation, but don't let it get you down. What I'm saying may take patience, but you're gonna make it out. I scorched my own 2 feet to pull you to safety. When the fires are burning